In this video, we're going to be covering scatter plots and trend lines. Now, before we begin, you should be familiar with what a scatter plot is. Well, let's begin. When scatter plots demonstrate a linear relationship, a straight line can be used to show the general pattern of the data. A trend line, or a line of best fit, is a straight line that should lie as close as possible to the points of data in the scatter plot. Now, keep in mind a line of best fit is a straight line. This excludes curved lines. So in these examples, write yes or no and describe whether or not the trend line, whether the line is a good trend line. If you look at number 1, there's a line going downward when clearly the scatter plot data shows that there's a positive relationship. So that line should be going up as well. So this is not a good trend line because the scatter plot's positive, but the trend line's negative. Number 2, we have our trend line going down the middle. It looks pretty good. I'd say yes, the trend line lies close to the data points. Now, when you see a good trend line, it should run down through the middle. In some cases, it'll touch many of the points. In some cases, it'll touch a few of the points. In some cases, it may touch none of the points. It just depends on how the data is spread out. As you can see in this trend line, it touches 2 points, but it misses most of them. But it looks like it runs down roughly through the middle of all of them. For number 3, we see this trend line, but I would say no. It's not a good trend line because it looks like it's above most of the data. You would expect the trend line to be down a little bit further and run through kind of the middle of that grouping of points. Number 4 looks like it runs to 3 points, but it's still not a good trend line because it should be a little bit higher and run through the middle of that data. So writing the equations of trend lines is what we're going to focus on next. To do that, you're going to choose any 2 points on the trend line and set up a ratio of rise over run to find the slope of the line. Or remember, slope is designated as m. Look at the y-axis to find the y-intercept of the line, again denoted or designated as b, and use these to write an equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals slope m x plus b, which is the y-intercept. And remember, those two are going to be numbers or values you're going to find. So write an equation in slope-intercept form for each trend line below. So what they want us to do is they just want us to write the equation of this line. The line is already there. They don't need you to make the line. So you don't have to worry about whether you have a good trend line or not. The trend line is already given for you. So what we need to do is we need to start off by finding the slope and the y-intercept. I'm going to do the slope first. And to find the slope, you're going to choose 2 points. So I'm going to choose this point right here. Now notice there is not a P data point right there. There's not a black dot right there. It doesn't matter. Remember, some trend lines will run through, like, it won't pass any of the dots. It won't pass any of the data points. And in this case, we just want the equation of the line, so it does not matter that one of the points that we choose is not one of the data points because it needs to be on this line. We choose this point, which is at 0, 8, and then I'm going to go down and find another point. This doesn't look good, this doesn't, but this one does look good, and look at that. It happens to be where a data point is. If there wasn't a data point, it wouldn't matter. Anyways, I'm going to choose this point right here, and that point looks like it's at 3, 7. So we take these 2 points and we find the slope. Remember, the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now y2 is 7, y1 is 8, and x2 is 3, x1 is 0. So 7 minus 8 is negative 1. 3 minus 0 is 3. Our slope is negative 1/3 or negative 1 over 3. Next, for our equation, we're going to need the y-intercept. Now remember, the y-intercept is where this line, this trend line, touches the y-axis, which is this axis right here. So it touches it, at 8. So our y-intercept, or b, is 8. Easy enough. Now we put it in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So in this case, y equals m, negative 1/3, x plus b, which is 8. Let's go to the next example. Again, we need to find the slope and the y-intercept. So let's start with the slope. I'm going to use this point right here. It looks like a pretty clean point, and it's at 0, 100. And then the next good point, there are lots of them. There's a good one here, there's a good one there, there's a good one here. I'm going to use this one right over here, and I could have used that one if I wanted. But again, notice this trend line doesn't actually pass any of the dots, and that's okay. That point is 4 and 150. So let's set up our formula. 150 minus 100 over 4 minus 0. Now, had you used the point 2 and 125, you would have been just fine as well. You still would have gotten the same answer. I got 50 over 4. In your case, you would have gotten 25 over 2. And if you divided that, you would have gotten 12.5. So that's our slope. Remember, our slope could be in a fraction, which you want to reduce to its most simplified form, or you can just divide and turn it into a decimal. Finally, our y-intercept, let's see, it touches the line, the y-intercept, at this point, which is 100. So our equation should be y equals 12.5x plus our y-intercept, which is 100. Let's look at the next one. Go ahead and pause and try it on your own if you'd like, but I'm going to move on. To find the slope, I'm using this point, 0 and 50. The next good point looks like, could have used this one, but I'm going to use this one down here, which is 2 and looks like 25. y2 minus y1, 25 minus 45 over 2 minus 0. Once I subtract that, I have negative 20 over 2, which is just negative 10. Our y-intercept is way up here, and that number is 45. So our equation should be y equals negative 10x plus 45. Next, to find the slope of the trend line below, Riley chose the points 180 and 230. So she chose 180, which is right there, and 2 and 30, which is right over here. Explain whether the points she chose will help her write the correct equation for the line. Remember, the equation for the trend line is the equation for this line right here. It does not have to touch any of the data points. You are essentially kind of ignoring the data points at this point. You're not going to be in a position right now where you're going to need to draw the trend line. They're already going to be there for you. So you just need to look at the lines and ignore all the data points at this point. So this will not actually help her because the points of data are not on the trend line. So because this point and that point aren't on the line, on our trend line, it's not going to give her the correct equation. So find the equation of this trend line. All right, well, I'm going to choose my first point, which is right here, 0 and 90. And my next point looks like it's going to be right here, 1 and 70. So I'm going to set up my equation. y2 is 70, y1 is 90, x2 is 1, x2 is 1, x1 is 0. So if I simplify that, I get negative 20 over 1, which is just negative 20, and that's my slope. My y-intercept is right over here, and it's 90. So y-intercept is 90. Our equation should be y equals negative 20x plus 90. Next, which of the following scatter plots could have a trend line with an equation of y equals 2x plus 5? This is going to require some thinking. Now you have to remember what these numbers mean. 2x is the slope. So a slope of 2x, you know it's positive, which means it should be going upward. So a is not positive, and that also eliminates d because d also looks like it's a negative relationship or trend. But C has a positive trend line, and B would also have a positive trend line. Our next clue is the 5. Now the 5 tells us our line should probably start higher. It wouldn't start at the 0, and it wouldn't start over here. So this looks like the trend line would start probably down there. This looks like it is 5 up. So I would think the best one is probably C. And we say this because C has a positive slope, whereas A and D do not. And Y-intercept is probably closer to 5. Now there are no numbers to tell us whether it's closer to 5 or 6 or 10 or 500, but you know that this one probably has a Y-intercept that's closer to 0. All right. Mrs. Hamilton surveyed some of her students by asking how many minutes they spent studying for their math test and the score they made on their math test. The results are shown below. So here we have our minutes studied as our x-axis value, our independent variable. Our dependent variable are our test scores. So question A, what is the slope of the trend line? To do this, we need to choose 2 points. I'm going to choose this first point, which is 0 and 60, and I'm going to choose this point right here, which is 15 and 70. We subtract, or put it into the formula and subtract 70 minus 60, 15 minus 0. We end up with 10 over 15, which is 2 over 3. So our slope is 2 over 3. B. What does a slope mean in the context of the situation? This is a different kind of question. So what does it mean? What does a slope mean? It's rise over run, right? Which is, it's the change in y over the change in x. Well, the y value has to do with the test scores. The change in the test scores over the change over the minutes studied. So it's test scores. So we see that if the test scores is 2 and the minutes studied is 3, that means that when the test scores go up by 2, then the minutes pass by 3. So the test scores go up 2 points for every 3 minutes is how we would write it in English. So 2 points in scores for 3 minutes of studying. What is the y-intercept of this trend line? The y-intercept is right over here, and it looks like it's 60. So that just means if we're asking what does a y-intercept mean in the context of this situation? Well, it says that a student who hasn't studied at all, studies 0 minutes, could be expected to get roughly a score of 60. Write the equation of the trend line. Well, the equation of the trend line is y equals mx plus b. Our slope, or m, is 2/3. Our b is 60. So y equals 2/3 x plus 60. So this means that if you didn't study, you'll probably have a score of 60. But for every 2 minutes, or for every 3 minutes, your test score will probably go up about 2 points. And that's what this equation means. So now we've gone over the trend lines in scatter plots. Go ahead and try some questions on your own. Good luck.